Hey, Lewis, and hi, everyone. Great to be here. A couple of open thoughts, right? I've worked with a number of CDMOs across multiple modalities, small molecule, sterile, biologics, packaging. And often this is, a dance in terms of the courting of a CDMO when you're actually proactively selecting it. It's almost like the Bachelor, GMP edition. You have multiple CMOs that are really looking to secure particular business. But when you think about the topic of this conversation, when do we have multiple CDMOs and how do we actually manage them? I often kind of think of it in three buckets. Is it something that was reactive because there was a quality issue or a solvency issue or risk of capacity that we have two CDMOs, right? Is it because we were proactively looking from a resilience and risk-based perspective in terms of diversifying our supply chain, right? If you really think about it, we're going from a globalization mindset to a regionalization. Right? So having multiple CDMOs in multiple parts of the globe often enable market access. Or the third part is it inherited? We purchased a product and a process and a supply chain from another company and now we're inheriting a supply chain that may not match up with strategic suppliers. So I think when we think about this particular topic, I, for one, think about it, was it reactive, proactive, or inherited? And that changes a little bit of how I go about working with coordinating multiple CDMOs. But as I'm sure all my panelists could probably share, um, even the coordination is something that internally, as a big sponsor of these CDMOs, we really need to be thinking about, do we show up as one company to those CDMOs or not? Because often we get in our own way in terms of the communication and the coordination piece. I mean, I take it back to when we've chosen, is it reactive, proactive, or inherited,
Right.
right? And in terms of reactive, I think many of you have seen a lot of policy shifts, I'd say maybe irrational policy shifts over the past year, whether it's been things like the Biosecure Act, where, we were not sourcing materials from China, or even tariffs, where you're trying to get ahead of, okay, well, our cost of goods will really inflate if we're limited to suppliers in one particular country or region. And so it's not as crazy, Lewis, in terms of saying, what's the thing that has thrown us off that's most weird. But that reactive policy shifting, you could say in a purest supply chain sense, what's the shortest lead time, fastest, best quality, and fastest delivery. But in many cases, irrational decisions in your supply chain are because of irrational policy shifts, right? That will drive you to move very quickly. And sometimes it means you qualify a source, but you don't use a source. And then you're running into another risk. Okay, they're qualified on paper, but will they be able to produce? I think other examples are, do you believe there's sufficient or excess capacity for a particular type of process? Or so, for example, we're seeing the advent of GLP-1s with, a huge spike in demand for sterile form finish and injectables, auto injectors, et cetera. So you're always trying to get ahead of that curve of saying, well, the cost is going to go up. I really want to lock in, you know, capacity for years in advance, if I anticipate a trend happening in the industry. Or the vice versa of it is, in COVID, we saw a lot of uh, capital investments in expansion of capacity, in drug product formulation, drug substance, and biologics. And so, if you really believe, well, the price of that, is going to go down because there is excess capacity, how do you play those choices in selecting your CDMOs or switching from one to the other?